Welcome to another podcast with Kurt Smith, the Chief Revenue Officer of Working Excellence. I'm joined today by JD Dickerson, one of the outstanding complex consulting salespeople out of the industry. We're going to chat a little bit about the kinds of things that we're seeing in the marketplace. So, JD, you want to have a second to introduce yourself?
Thank you for that intro. I'm born and bred a sales guy. I didn't start in consulting, right? Started long ago. My first job was in car sales, just learning how to transact. And then got tired of those hours, and my wife got more tired of those hours, and that led me to more white collar 9 to 5 work, and just sort of tried to learn everything I could, took every training I could along the way. And I describe myself as a sales mutt. I don't subscribe to any one methodology or whatever. I'm more of a hodgepodge of just experiences across the spectrum. So that's kind of my background. But it's been all sales.
I always admire the fact that you've been able to and choose to keep improving yourself and taking the good and turning them into rules of engagement, the way that you think about a deal, you go after a deal, you build the relationships that are necessary, and you're always saying, what could I do better? So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's one of those things I think that complex salespeople, again, a lot of it is trial and error. And when
Right.
you things work well, you keep them, and when things don't seem like they're working right, you question them, and then you go out and you make improvements. So it's I always certainly have respected your ability to sift through those things and take the best of all of the things that you're hearing in the market.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
So let's talk about complex sales a little bit. One of the things that we've both seen, I think, in our careers is new logo development and how important that is to the lifeblood of the companies that we've worked for, and how having a specialization in being able to do new logo is so important because as a general rule of thumb, what we've seen in the market is that your base of customers, let's say you have, $100 million in revenue for your base business, that growing those accounts is more what we would call, I think we've termed in the past, the farming part of the business.
Right.
And that in the new logo is different. So that's more like 10%. So revenue, if you can grow with new logos, then you've got 20 in the existing base, which is just radiation. And then the 10% of new logos and new relationships needs to come from those sets of accounts, those new logos. So how hard it is to be doing new logo sales, complex selling consulting services to companies that have never heard of your brand, don't know anything about you, and how challenging it is to get, as I say, term to get invited to the party, get asked to participate
Yeah.
because you sound like you're different, or you have, a different set of skills, you have a different set of capabilities, and you understand the business at a level where you're really an expert. So share your thoughts on how you get found in the new logo space. There's a lot of companies that sound like they do the same thing, and what we could easily categorize as a crowded marketplace.
I think it's a good question, and I wonder if there's even an answer, because the question is, how do you get found? I'm not sure you do. You kind of gotta get noticed more than get found. In new logo, what I've learned is it's not an individual sport. People that try to approach this business as though it's an individual sport, and for example, when I came up as a wrestler, right? You won and lost based on how good you did, and it wasn't because the other guy missed the game-winning shot, or because the pitcher threw a ball. I mean, it's all you. But that's not consulting sales. That's not new logo enterprise sales. It's often a combination of plays, and we could sit here and talk stories all day. You probably know some of them, right? But you may get a meeting with a key stakeholder and a client, but that doesn't mean that they have the power to get you a services agreement in place or anything like that. And so you may need an executive relationship at a higher level. You need to learn how to figure out where those relationships exist. Where's the leverage? There's always leverage in these deals. There's always something. And I've found that the best companies recognize that, and they lean in on that, and they assist the salesperson, instead of some companies where I've seen they almost downplay it, right? They expect you to be, they think sales is magic, and they say, "Oh, go get these logos and just go do what you do." And then it just doesn't work that way, right? It's a team sport. My job is not to be the magician or the hero. It's to find the leverage and then just crank on that leverage, whether it's an executive relationship or whether it's a person at an account who needs something. We could talk stories all day.
Yeah, I think that orchestration is a word that we use a lot, right? Is that in a complex sale, unlike some of there may be more simple products that that the sales rep can have all aspects of knowledge on and portray it and take the sale cradle to grave. One of the things I think that's interesting about the complex consulting sale is that at the end of the day, you're orchestrating your experts, your service lines, and your capabilities
Correct.
into an opportunity, and you're setting up you're orchestrating again these people to come in. They understand the objective, they understand the hot buttons, which is your responsibility, the sales team's responsibility to understand and set up. But it's that, let me set you up, you Mr. Miss Service Line person. Here's the situation, here's what I need you to do, and just do what you do really, really well, and we'll be fine. Well, that'll be enough to win the day, along with that orchestration of getting
Hmm.
is just different in the kind of selling that consulting services especially
Yeah.
has to be able to do, because of it's such a, to your point, it's such a team sell, and there's so many elements that need to be successfully brought together.
Well, when you think about a team sell and orchestration, the ability it's leadership without a title is what it is. And I think a good enterprise salesperson is going to understand to some degree leadership, because people have to follow you. People have to come along for the ride. You have to be able to organize the weight of the firm that you're with, the full weight of it behind you, to build the momentum and push the deal through. If you can't do that, it's a struggle, right? And not only the full weight, but it's got to be organized weight, right? So it can't just be throwing mud on the wall. It has to be everyone working together and understanding and remembering what's the true north, like where are we headed. And I believe my job is not to necessarily sell so much as it is to create an environment where a sale can be made. That's how I think about my role, is like I'm creating an environment where the client can get what they want and our team can bring to bear the full breadth of their capability and service.
Sometimes there's a misnomer or misunderstanding with delivery, the service lines and delivery folks will just get me in there and I'll do my magic. And one of the things that we've seen for sure is that there's a step before that, which is I've got your attention as a now. You've taken my call. You want to hear a little bit about what my company does, my complex, my services, and now they've heard enough to say I'll hear a little bit more about it before I schedule. Before you've earned the right to bid on a project or to even give that next level presentation with the service line. You have to entice them enough in that first meeting, because you may not have the opportunity, nor is it qualified enough to bring a lot of resources in.
Yeah.
So what your job is to say, we understand your problem to the degree that you should consider us. And you don't do that to get to that meet. You have to do that without expecting that you're going to have that, technical expert on the phone with you or as a part of that call, because you're just trying to crack the door to earn the confidence of the customer to invest more time in your organization. There's a big piece of it that you have to demonstrate that you're different, or that you have your really depth of experience, and that whole notion of storytelling, right? Is being able to say, I've done this before. I know how to do this. I've solved this problem. You say your problem is in this area. Let me tell you a couple of stories where I solved the same sort of problem for another company, hopefully in the same industry or like you
Yeah.
in the marketplace. So let's talk a little bit about your thoughts on storytelling and that kind of thing.
So I think there's two aspects to storytelling, and if we're talking about a specific story, obviously there's a framework for that. I think one of the things that I've learned is how to think logically, right? How to lead a customer, like because think about it this way: you're a customer, right? We talk a lot about empathy, right? And looking at things from another person's perspective. When you're a customer and someone calls you, let's say you're a vice president of technology, I'm not the only vendor that's calling you, right? I sell consulting services. Another guy's selling a product. You're pitching this. The people are coming from all angles. Some companies are quasi product, quasi services. There's all flavors. So I think one of the top skills that you need as a new logo or someone who's going in a tip of the spear, like a new logo salesperson, a hunter, you got to have the ability to quickly define who you are and what your company is all about in a way that categorizes you in the market. I have a saying that says confused people do nothing, right? If you're confused, you stall out. And so there's a lot of tools out there as far as vendors and companies. It's my job to let them know what type of tool I am and and then how to use me. And so very quickly being able to communicate, hey, this is what we're all about. This is where we fit in the market. And then getting into, okay, here's what we do. And that's where the storytelling comes into place. It's all one big story, but then you have these stories that you can tell. I used to be a question asker. I think there's two types of people on these calls. There's question askers and there's storytellers. And I used to be a question asker 5 or 6 years ago and got very limited results. Once I became a storyteller, it was like the whole world opened up. And the prospects, the buyers, they sort of guide you. If you tell the right stories to the right person, the result usually ends up being the buyer goes, I know how to use you. I understand what your capabilities are and how you impact the business. Let me put you right here.
The word empathy is one that I absolutely love for sales, is thinking the way the customer is receiving the message. And I also think that, as you said, the customers are really smart. One of the things you don't want to do, putting yourself in their shoes, is you don't want them to be struggling with what you are and what you do.
Exactly.
To your point, because that leads them not even focusing on your message, they're trying to categorize you.
Yep.
So the best way, once you get that initial, not even that second meeting where you bring the expertise in, that first meeting where you're just like, let me tell you about us, that the empathy that you have to have for these people is like, okay, what are you? First level, are you a software company? Are you a
Right.
service company? Okay, inside of services, what kind of services do you
It's a funnel,
specialize in?
right? It's a logic funnel. It's an outline.
Help me
Yeah.
get
Yep.
really quickly to what you are, and then I don't have to be thinking about that in the while you're speaking.
100%.
I can say, okay, I know what you do. Now impress me that in the things that you do, that you're really, really good at those. I saw something online I wanted to bring up. I think his name is James Borbart. He was doing a seminar and he said, hey, the three things you have to do as a sales guy, complex selling, is you have to do three things. You have to come in and you have to come across as you're really smart. The second thing you have to do is you have to be enthusiastic and passionate, is another word that I like to
Energy.
use, and that you're almost come across with that lucky you found me attitude. We've
Mhm.
talked about that. It's like, hey, there's a lot of noise out there, but there's certain companies that have certain aspects that you're going to try to find, and they're hard to find because all the messaging sounds a lot alike. So that's number two, is that enthusiasm or passion. And the third one, and this is where the storytelling really interlocks, is you have to be an expert in your field. The more you can get to that, the better the customer is going to receive it
Correct.
and then feel like, okay, I want to hear more from this firm because the person that's talking to me is definitely understands the market, is smart, is enthusiastic about helping companies and solving problems. And by storytelling a couple of stories, I believe that this person feels different, or
Yep.
this salesperson in this company feels like they're an expert in their field and thus is worth me investing more of my time into understanding what they do.
Yeah, quick piggyback on that. So I was the first time I ever really heard that concept. God, it must have been 10 years ago. I was sitting in a room. I was sitting in a CIO roundtable. It was one of those things you sponsor and you go hang out with CIOs. We're all sitting around this table and they're just talking amongst each other. And the subject of vendor selection comes up. One lesson I learned a long time ago was I picked a company that I believed in. Like I'd worked with them before and I knew they were a good company. So I met with them and I met the sales rep and I had issues with them. I didn't trust them, wasn't sure, but I knew the company was great. And so I went with them anyways. And he said it'd come back to bite me in the ass. And he said that's when I learned it isn't just the company, it's also the rep. You got to believe in both and you got to trust both. And it was at that moment that I thought to myself, okay, so that's a secret, right? And it goes back to what you say, what we always talk about is like, what's the differentiator? Well, you got your company differentiators, right? You got your technology and what you can do and all that. But the truth is, in a no brand consulting world, I'm the differentiator. The
Yeah.
experience you have with me is the difference. And a lot of times that makes the difference, right? It's like, hey, are you easy to work with? Do you have a plan? Do you seem competent and you're leading me to the next step? The buyer doesn't want to sit and think about what to do next. You have to know what to do next. And you have to be, it's like shoot and pull, right? You got people that can hit the ball in the hole, but then you got people that can shoot for shape, which means you hit the ball in the hole and you roll the cue ball to the next shot because you know what's coming next and you're competent and you can, right? And so how do you make it easy to buy from you? How do you be easy to deal with, right?
Just to commiserate on how hard new logo sales are in this space is that, you know, these companies already have approved vendors, and we've also seen, I think, a rise in the power that the purchasing organization will have, and like, oh, we were trying to reduce our number of vendors, we don't want to add vendors. So you've got that pressure, and then you've also got all these personal relationships. Oh, I worked with, JD at this other company. Now I've moved companies, and I'll go work with him over at this new company.
Mhm.
And that works, but you don't your relationships only go so far. So when you're out hunting for new logos, you have to assume or be ready for the fact that they don't know you, and that you have to come in there and you have to feel different. Like the this is a team that understands my business, understands like the marketplace that they live in, and I understand now why they feel like they're different and why they're worthy of a chance to giving
Yeah.
them a shot.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting in the marketplace. We have all these sales methodologies, and we've gone from Powerbase and Spin to Revenue Storm and insert methodology here, and they all have good principles to them. But I think that the one of the problems that I've seen in the market is that the methodology will be at the 50,000 foot level. Got to qualify, got to get them to yes. You got to have. Do you have a relationship with the executive buyer? Do you have relationship with the person that's going to sign off on the? Where does your power lie inside the organization? Does IT love you? Does IT have somebody else that they want? Plus, all these various things. One of the things that is underinvested in, and again, I'm going to go back to the importance of the storytelling, is that there's not a lot of, and I think you touched upon it earlier, there's not a lot of, here's how we tell our story. It's more like, and here's how some of the stories where we've helped solve this, these are the 10 business problems
Yeah.
that are really powerful to go tell the story around. They don't arm, I don't think, the new salespeople, especially, with the power of that information, and they sort of they hire people and they say, good luck finding, go do what you do, and good luck getting pipelining and telling our story well. And I always point back to, like, I've been in meetings where the CEO comes in to an executive meeting and we want to connect, may have all those high level connections, and they'll tell some stories that are absolutely stunning, great stories. And then you walk out of there and you don't maybe say it, but you're like, why don't I know that story? That's a great story and it's told well. But if you compare what the CEO is saying in that case to the worst sales rep on the team, and there's a chasm, there's just a vast difference. And I think that we underinvested in teaching sort of the new people, especially, and maybe some of the bottom half of the sales team that's struggling.
And a lot of companies I've noticed will try to do sales enablement where they'll teach these stories. But then the people they bring in to tell the stories are technologists or they're into the bits and bytes. And so they tell the salespeople, they start going into the in depth about, we did this coding language and then we integrated with this thing. And it's like it becomes this. this technology story, right? Where we're salespeople, I'm not telling technology stories. I'm telling you, hey, there was business A. Business A does X, and business A was having this problem, and they needed help, so they called us, and we were able to help them solve this challenge. And now these are the results. Very simple story arc. It's called the hero arc, the hero journey. Most salespeople have heard of that, but they don't really know how to apply it. I don't think as well. Yeah, and then also I'll just tell you this. Here's one thing I learned. Right, when I started storytelling, at first it was awkward. At first I felt awkward because you'd almost feel this urge to skip it, like they weren't listening. You'd tell your company, you'd tell where you fit in the market, and then jump into the stories. You show the menu of services, and you start telling some stories based on the logos on the page, and you almost feel like you're just talking. But what I realized over time is the more I did it, the more I realized they're not disengaged. They're actually absorbing this, and when I tell these stories, they're quiet because they're actually contemplating, where can I use these guys? These guys sound different. They sound pretty good. Where can I use them? And so the more I kept telling these stories, the more I realized that they're the secret to unlocking everything. And the better you can tell them, and you got to move up and down, right? So you can tell the same story with a little bit different flavor based on who you're talking to, researching the person you're talking to, and kind of weaving in and out of different aspects of the story. But it's how people learn, right? It's how people learn. And what I've learned is, like, anyone can get up and talk about capabilities. Anyone can just assert things, right? We see that all the time. People just assert things all the time. When you tell a story, it has credibility. Now you're not into assertion, you're into proof, and you're into application. And that's very powerful.
Yeah, I think to your point, in new logo, when you get that first call, they don't know what you do. They don't know where you fit in the industry. They don't know necessarily what you do. You've gotten some time in their calendar. And it is, as much as it's a little bit counterintuitive to have to talk first because you want to
Mhm.
get from them, is ultimately what we want. But I think that first pitch, that 8 to 12 minutes of explaining the company is in the marketplace, and then the kinds of services that we have and the kinds of problems that we've solved, and again
Yep.
trying to best match those. After that 12 minutes, you've earned the right to then have them ask them the questions that you need, because now they can contextualize where you are, what part of the market, and the kinds of problems that I'm having. Tell me, and then you get that. Okay, now I'm willing to open up because you've demonstrated back to before you have enthusiasm,
Well,
you're smart, and you understand the problem. You're a business
it's
person.
human nature, right? So think about this, Kurt. Think about this. You got a let's say you got a health challenge, and somebody comes along random. You have no idea who they are, and they say, "Hey, I can help you with your health challenge." And they start asking you these questions about this and that and the other thing. What's your blood pressure like? Or they start asking you questions. But in your head, you're on the other side going, hang on a minute. Are you a heart doctor? Are you a knee doctor? Are you an eye doctor? Like, I'm not telling you anything until I know who you are. So you're kind of out of turn, just jumping into the conversation, asking an executive what keeps them up at night.
Yeah, I have
When
that story. I had a software company that was trying to sell me some some lead generation software, and they were a couple of young guys, a young guy and a young gal, and they started asking me they started to go down that path of,
right.
so what keeps you up at night? And I said, well, you sort of captured, you got me, and I said I would take this call, but what keeps me up at night is I have a limb that hangs over my house right now here, and in the
Hang in
event
the
that
window.
the storm comes, can you help me with that? And they'd be like, no, I can't help you with that. Okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't you tell me what you're able to do, and
Exactly.
then I can apply it to what my business problems are.
The stakeholders are savvy, right? Because so many times they've got bait and a switch to where you'll say, "What keeps you up at night?" And then you tell them what your pain is, tell them what the problem is, and they go, "Oh, yeah, we can do that." And so it's sort of this trust thing going on. There's a seesaw, right? It's kind of like if I walked up to you on this and we were just meeting, and I was like, "Hey, Kurt, I'm JD," and then you're like, "I'm Kurt," and I go, "Oh, where do you live?" And you tell me, and then I don't tell you where I live, and I say, "Are you married?" You go, "Yeah, I'm married," and I go, "How many kids you got?" And all of a sudden, I start getting all this information from you, and now the relationship starts going out of balance because I know all these things about you, and you don't know anything about me. You're playing tennis, got to throw the ball back, right? So that there's trust. So
Totally agree.
yeah,
The idea that you what you should say is hypothetically in your examples, you have stories where you say, "Oh, that's interesting, Kurt. You live in Morristown, New Jersey. I lived for a long time in Florham Park, so I'm just down the hill, just around the corner from you."
you got to toss the
So
ball back. Yeah,
so you're lobbing it back again and saying, "Oh, I understand. Oh, Jersey's great. I lived there for a while in Hoboken when I
right.
was younger." Whatever the story is, right? It's a back and forth, and it. But again, if you set the stage, it's treating empathy, common themes, right? Empathy. What are they thinking? Two, how quickly I have got to get to a point where I explain quickly what I do and why I'm different and how I fit in the marketplace and how hopefully giving across that enthusiasm that being an expert and that unlocks that first door where they say, okay, let me tell you a little bit about some of the things that that we struggle with here. And it's you have to go through that process to earn that, I think, versus stepping in and just asking questions right out of the chute and because you haven't earned that right, I believe.
Yeah, and that's the meta idea, right? So I gave it a conversation as an example. If it's one-sided questions, it's not a conversation, it's an interrogation. But the meta idea is all relationships work that way, right? If I'm constantly giving, 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 and the other person's taking, 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 the relationship goes out of balance and the relationship dies. That's just the way it works.
Yeah, I want to go. Let's go back to something you said or touch upon and go a little deeper into complex selling and technology firms like we've worked for. The new logo team is meant to break open that door, and then there's a period of time usually where there's then a transition to more of a farmer. So the hunter, let's call the new logo people hunters, and let's call the account managers more of the farmers. Although sometimes people find that, again, that's 20% of the revenue should grow out of the farmers. So they
Right.
play an important role, but they just typically have a little bit different set of skills. And and what you touched upon before, I think, is a problem sometimes in technology-based service firms, is they'll put a very technical account manager onto the
Too
account.
early.
They also don't have as much confidence as new logo people do to go and say, okay, I'm in division A of conglomerate company. I should be able to go talk to divisions B, C, D, and E and start to build pipeline over there.
Yeah.
The question is really how do you go like ensure we've seen a lot of different models, some good and some bad, where they transition too quickly into those farmers. But on the other side, the company really wants the new logo guys to be, every year, guys and gals, to go out and crack that next set
Right.
of clients. So it's a really delicate balance. Give me your thoughts on your experiences with that, JD.
Well, so I think that functionally, there's no difference between a new logo deal and jumping to another BU, right? Like the only difference is you don't have to sign a new services agreement. It's already in place, right? So it should be easier to have that conversation. But mentality, we talked about sales methodologies too. And I think sales methodologies are only really there to support a mindset. If you already have the mindset, like for example, if you're have the mindset of I want to close as many deals as fast as possible, qualification becomes a natural progression out of that. I'm going to be qualifying you out of my own desire to get to a deal, not because it's a box that I have to check on the bank spreadsheet or whatever. And so that mindset of like going after the next thing that can be applied if you got an enterprise with 50,000 people in it and they do 20 billion in revenue or whatever it is, whatever the numbers are. As soon as you get that first deal, you're not gonna, as a hunter, you're not gonna be satisfied just sitting there watching it. You're gonna be going, hey, there's 49,999 other employees. Who else wants to have a problem solved? I don't see fundamentally a difference between knocking down a new logo and then immediately knocking down the next thing. But a farmer, see, we talk too about level one, two, and three salespeople a lot, right? We talk about the level one sales guy, it's the guy that learns how to knock down doors. And the level two sales guy is the guy that learns how to run a process effectively. And the level three is the guy that knows how to hit an executive priority, right? A lot of those farmers, they know how to do the level three. We've seen guys do, $50 million multi-year projects because they understand that technology and they know how it applies and they can just sort of come up with this massive proposal for a client, that's their skill set. But that can't be applied until you're well networked inside of a company. So you need someone who knows and has the aggression and has the like passion and energy to go develop those relationships. And then once you have, you know that who runs finance, and you know the person that runs HR, and you know the person over here at IT, and you start to triangulate all that into a cohesive, like end-to-end solution, and you close that mega deal. There's two skill sets there, right? You can't just do that with us if you're single threaded in an enterprise with 50,000 people and one guy. You're not going to take and hit that mega deal that way. So
Yeah.
it's just
I think there's a
skill set.
bunch of topics here that are tricky, and a lot of it comes down to compensation plans and the way that you structure. And we've worked for companies where diminishing comp, like the first year, your comp is this because you cracked it, because you spent a year trying to get in, and now you have a year
Right.
of full compensation. And the next year you have a diminished compensation, let's say, on that one, because we want to incent you to go get. And then the third year it's less. You transition in a farmer, and I think that's another piece that's really important.
I do.
Is the farmers will typically get paid less per dollar in because it's harder, it's easier, and the new logo is harder. So you have to have the appropriate amount of overlap, I think, between the original sales guy and then the farmer, the hunter that sold it, and so I think sometimes I've seen companies be a little penny wise and pound foolish over having trying to get the sales guy out to go sell something new and leaving all sorts of money on the table because the technical, let's call it, account manager that goes in there wasn't able to farm the revenue that they would have if they had worked in tandem for a longer period of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I also think companies have to be smart too, is that they have to look at, let's say, Division A, using our example from before. If Division A is now a farmer account, they have to be open-minded to say, yeah, we want JD, let's use you as an example. We'll give the farmer, they'll do a transition on a Division A, which has been sold a year ago, and now we want to treat divisions B, C, and D as a new logo because we haven't done any revenue with them. And, let's treat it as greenfield. Let's go after it, full guns blazing. And let's use the experts who are really good. The only difference is you got it, as you said, you've got an MSA in place, and hopefully you've got a good reputation in Division A because you've done good work in that first project that you did with that division.
Yeah. I mean, compensation is always important. Probably something I don't think about as much, just being, an individual contributor, but certainly the moths will run to the flame. And if you don't have the proper compensation plan, you can incentivize bad behavior for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the relationship with delivery. It's always a tricky thing, right? Because there's a lot of different DNA between delivery folks, tech service lines, and really deep technical people that we bring to bear inside of our clients, and the sales team. We just different types of people, right? You have to bring it all together. Any words of wisdom or experiences around partnering with delivery to make that partnership really work well?
You can't be an empty suit with these guys. You got to be understanding of their world and what their challenges are. One, over communication. Everything that happens, it should be at least mentioned, right? I'll give you an example. The other day, we had a project kickoff, and the project coordinator reached out to me, the salesperson, and had two other delivery people on there. And it was a sales to delivery handoff. So it's me and three of them. And I immediately recognize, you know what? Our vertical head has something to say here. Our client partner has something to say here. Like they're just inviting me, but that's not going to be adequate. I'm not going to do an adequate handoff. So I immediately fire up an email to these other folks to say, hey, this meeting just got put on the calendar. Who all feels like they need to be here? And there was two or three people that were critical of that meeting that raised their hand, and we got them in the meeting. We had a successful meeting. What would have happened otherwise is I would have went in the meeting alone. I would have been able to answer some of their questions, but they would have asked a bunch of questions that I didn't know. And I would have had to say, oh, you got to go talk to this guy. You got to talk. And I would have directed them who to talk to, but that would have slowed us down by days. And now all of a sudden, you've expanded the sales cycle inadvertently. And all you had to do was over communicate. So partnering with delivery is about over communication. Partnering delivery is about not being a jerk. Like these guys are under pressure too. They have metrics, they have goals, they have all these things they're trying to hit. And so there's a tension there, right? Because I'm trying to move fast and they're trying to move smart. And sometimes those things don't mesh, right? So we've got to come to an agreement, like to figure out how we're going to best deliver the best quality, but do it in a fast enough way where we don't lose the client, right? Because we all know what time does. It kills everything, right? So you got to be likable. I think it helps to be somewhat knowledgeable so that. And another thing, right? It's don't take three swings when you can take one. Coming to meetings already organized, right? Like, do you have a list? Do you have five things you're trying to cover in this meeting? Are your thoughts organized? If you're just coming to meetings and then after the meeting, you're like, oh, I forgot to ask, and oh, this, it's just these guys already moved into their next meeting. So it's, and another thing is like delivery will love you if you're organized and you come to the meeting and you get a 30-minute meeting done in 17 minutes. There's nothing better and clients too. Like if I can land the plane, get everything done I'm supposed to do, I don't need to hang out with you for 13 more minutes. You're a busy guy. Like you might want a bathroom break before your next meeting or go grab a sandwich or a coffee or whatever. Like think about other people. That's I think is the key of this whole thing
I think it's another word that we've used a couple of times on this is the orchestration, right?
yeah.
You're orchestrating with the client to make them feel like that you have control of your organization, you understand their problem, you've brought the right people to bear. That's how and you've told some interesting stories how you solve problems. That's all about winning their trust. But the internal trust is also important. And that's by being, as you say, you orchestrate it, you communicate, here's the plan, here's how we're doing against it. You then, when success happens and you sell a deal, you share the success, right?
That's right. I was saying, Kurt, not to interrupt that. I was saying, it says the only reason that the light is shining on you is so that you can reflect it on somebody else. Every time. If you're absorbing the light, then you're wasting it. It is a tool. It's not something for you to bask in. The recognition is just another tool for you to lead. And you say, you know what? Awesome, but it wasn't just me. It was this guy and this guy and this. And if there are salespeople who get more done because the delivery team and the solutions guy all like them more. So they give you, if you want people's best effort, right? They're not going to give you their best effort if they don't like you. That's just a fact. They're going to give you enough so they don't get in trouble and no more.
I also think there's a component of success begets success kind of thing. So if you're demonstrate you're one of the sales reps you've orchestrated well, you've set them up for success. There's, as I like to say, that we hate surprises right in front of a client. That means something we didn't prep the sales guys. We didn't prep it right because we learned something and it changed direction, and we should know that before we bring people to bear. 99 times sometimes it happens, but 99 times out of 100 we have to be orchestrating that. And then I think people gravitate towards like, okay, JD has his shit together. If I get 3 phone calls for the next deal, I'm going to go talk to JD about his deal because I know he knows how
Yeah.
to orchestrate the deal, and I stand a better chance of winning by working with him.
Yeah, no, I agree. And this just happened the other day where we had a proposal. And after the call, we always debrief, right? We're over communicating. I'm pulling everybody back together for 2 minutes and talking about. And by the way, when I debrief, I don't go first. I want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I want to hear from other people. I don't want to. I don't want to set the tone. I want to. I want to hear what they're really thinking. But we got this meeting, and the solution consultant says, "Thank you." And I said, "For what?" And he said, "Not talking over me." Everybody else, every 60 seconds, the salesperson's jumping in going, hey, and I just want to make a comment on top of that. I thought really hard about that because I couldn't believe that professional salespeople were doing this, right? In these calls. Because, and if anybody's listening, we have these proposals where there's levels of expertise that you have different speakers, right? It's not just me giving an hour long. It's an orchestrated conversation. They have things to say. And if I come in over the top, what am I doing? Like I said earlier, I'm creating an environment where sales can happen. And in order for a sale to happen, they have to trust that SC. If I don't even trust the SC or the delivery guy or whoever, if they don't even trust that guy, then I'm undermining their credibility. I'm killing my own self.
Yeah.
So yeah,
We always talk about this, right? They're buying the technical delivery capability. Then they love the sales guy and the executive presence and the orchestration. But at the end of the day, they look into the eyes of the people you bring. At that point, a big part of them feeling comfortable to pull the trigger with a new logo, with a new company, is that the trust in that delivery person being able to make them successful.
I guess it's called knowing your role and knowing when to talk and also knowing when to shut up.
And one of my favorite debriefing questions, I totally agree with you, that is letting people talk that were on the call, give their feelings, but then somewhere in that call, then getting to what could we have done better. I think that's including myself. I've been doing this for a lot of years, so I've seen a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that emphasis or whatever it may have been, I could have done better with, like, you should have more focused on this. A lot of times we will have delivery people that won't let the customer get their full question out because they're so excited about giving the answer. They kind of know where it's going
Yep.
and they cut off the customer and then they give the answer and you haven't gotten the full. So one of the things often that's feedback is, and sometimes you use a side channel texting for this, to say, let's make sure that we don't step on the customer. They have the money, they have the knowledge of their problem. We want them to articulate and explain their problem to us. And so while they're asked, make sure the question is fully done before jumping. Let the question come out. And sometimes you'll be surprised. The emphasis will change because they'll say something at the end of
Right.
what they were going to say, but you cut it off and didn't get that.
And then the other thing that I think is completely overlooked is prep. And I'm a believer that if you got for every minute of presentation, you need at least a minute, probably 2 minutes of prep. And that includes a dry run. And people hate it. People hate being put on the spot and go, what are you going to say? What is it? What are you going to say when we get to this part of the proposal? And they struggle with it because it's like they can't act, I guess, even if they like barely get it out and just formulate like a little bit of a framework of an idea. It's better. It comes out better in the meeting. And also it gives you an opportunity to go, hey, you didn't mention X, or you said it this way. That might be a red flag because this other thing's going on. So it gives you a chance to course correct or fine tune the messaging before you go in the meeting. And I see that step skipped all the time and also as a sales rep, you have to push because they'll tell you no. Oh, we don't have time for that. There's not. No, we're going to do it. I'll shorten it if we need to, but we got to do this.
I also hear in the dry run, they'll say, well, I'm going to talk about, like, the sun and the moon and the sky and and you say, no, 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 no. Don't tell me what you're going to say. Say it like I'm the
Yeah,
customer.
say it. Just pretend.
Because
Yep.
as much as you think that, oh, well, I'll come up with something, the more you have to vocalize that, similar to our storytelling
Yep.
in the early stages, you can say, oh, I'll tell us. Well, if you haven't practiced the story,
Right.
and it doesn't have a beginning and a middle and an end, then and you do it ad hoc, it's never going to be as good
Right.
as if it's practiced. And you say, this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to emphasize, because your prep, Mr. Orchestrator, says this is important to them. I'm going to emphasize that point as a part of me giving my answer to what's important to our practice or
Yeah.
the methodology we used or whatever the thing is. You're gonna dwell on, but here are the words that I'm saying when I say it.
Yeah.
And I think you're shocked over how many things that in the prep in the dry run where you say, no, 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 I wouldn't say that because that only opens up a little bit of question as to how many times we've really done this or what our technical capabilities are with that or whatever.
Yeah.
Those words have to be measured so you don't open up a new problem.
And another thing that I notice that people do, or that happens a lot in these conversations, there's a tendency to be a little too prescriptive and a little too inflexible and too definite, right? So they'll say, this is this way or this is that way. And you're still in stage one of of this situation, of this proposal. Like it can be refined and all these things. So you got to be careful, like the way, because there's some strong opinions. Technologists have strong opinions. This is the way it should be done, and it's like, hey, that may be true, but this client does it 80% of that way. So you have to be careful about the saying the other 20%, so you have to back it down a notch and appear as though you're sort of a chameleon, right? Like we can do it however you want to do it, like Mr. Client, like
This is our experience. We see a lot of times, like for that kind of a project, let's just make it up. AWS is the right hyperscaler of choice, but they may be a big Google shop. So we do a lot of AWS work, but what we're seeing is Google is with BigQuery is making all sorts of inroads and
right.
for different applications and using that as, for these parameters, high volume,
And
low latency, whatever it
and
is, right?
whenever I start a proposal, there's usually three things that I say in the beginning. One is, guys, I'm going to be a ruthless timekeeper. So if you see me interrupt my team and tell them we got to move on, it's for you, not for me. We got it. We got to get to the end. Number two, I tell them this is the first step of a multi-step process. See, a lot of people go into a proposal like that sort of finality. And I never get stuck there. Because if you don't set the stage that this is not final, this is like a draft. I'm like, guys, we had a 1 hour scoping call. This is the best we can do. You can't expect us to hit the bullseye in one shot. Now, if we do, great. But you got to give us the chance, if we don't, to course correct. So injecting that into the conversation right up front and saying, guys, we're just getting started. This is step one. And they all relax. Everyone relaxes. But if you pigeonhole it and say, this is it, this is the solution, and this is the price, they're going to go back and say, well, we didn't like this part. We didn't like the price. It was 20% too high. We didn't like, and then you're toast. You're done. It's over. Because
What's important is by hedging that way, by saying, listen, this was limited information. This is our experience. This is the way, that as long as you can defend the logic behind it, then you still come across as a good business person and technologist to say, there are a lot of options, but this is the way we sort of see these projects going and what we think is important along the way.
overconfidence is a killer in this, because if you come in guns blazing saying, hey, we heard you and we know exactly what to do and this is it, and then they do it, you're up 1%, you're dead, you're toast. And so you got to be careful.
Well, in the interest, JD, of being a ruthless timekeeper, I know that we're up against the time limit here. So I appreciate your insights and your thoughts, your time here today. I thought it was a fun exchange of experiences and ideas. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.